Okay, so you probably don't often see the words responsible and hostile on the same slide. But what I want to do by characterizing that way is show you that, in fact, all of what we try to do as technologists exists within the context of the world in which we live, which is populated by humans, not all of whom are good. In general, we don't set out to create bad, malicious technology unless you're a hacker, but that doesn't mean we don't. So it begs this question: is technology good, bad, or neutral? And they're actually quite different perspectives. If you live in Silicon Valley, tech is an unalloyed good. If you live in many parts of the global south, there's a whole lot more ambivalence there because people are suffering from the consequences and not necessarily reaping the benefits. I like this quote from William Gibson. I think technologies are morally neutral until we apply them. It is only when we use them for good or evil that they become good or evil. And we, everyone here, that's the we in that sentence. We're the ones that are doing the applying. We're the ones that are not necessarily taking into account the consequences of our technology on others. And so I would like to encourage you to become what I call not a utopian or a dystopian, but a pragmatist. Because we suffer consistently from unintended consequences. Mark Andreessen once said that actually technologists are really bad at understanding the consequences of their technology. Unfortunately, so is everybody else. But in fact, we do suffer inconsistently because very often those with the least have the least ability to battle against biases or other abuses of technology. But why now? Well, first, things are just a whole lot more connected and complicated, and it makes it even harder to predict how someone might use your grand achievement in a way that you didn't really expect them to. And the impact technology has on our life, the footprint is massive now. We're not just talking about recommendations on an e-commerce site. We're talking about recommendations for cancer treatments or for parole or sentencing in the criminal justice system. Those things have real consequences in people's lives. And then there's this little thing called ChatGPT, large language models, BART, whichever one you want to talk about. We really don't understand the potential for good or the potential for harm that is going to come out of general availability of these models. But unfortunately, the bad guys are usually early adopters. And I stole that quote from Thomas Friedman in the New York Times this morning. So we have to really think about how are we going to control our use of technology? And how might we do that? And that's when we start talking about responsible tech. Now, we did a survey with MIT Research, and using this very specific definition on the next two slides of responsible tech. And it talks about how we are looking at values when we consider our technology, trying to consider unintended consequences and the negative impact. And it includes a wide variety of voices in not only the adoption of and deployment of technology, but also in the creation. And we want to try to manage and mitigate the risks associated to all of the communities. See, the problem is we're problem solvers. We see a problem, and here's my target audience right there. And I'm going to pay attention to you guys, and I'm going to solve your problem, and I'm going to ignore them over there because they're not my problem right now. You guys are. But what happens if I lift up my head and look at the whole room, and then I can start to say, oh, wait a minute. There might be impacts to these people over here that I'm not thinking about because I'm just paying attention to you guys. And that's how we're trained. We're trained to solve problems. We need to retrain ourselves to look up. And those are both very negative aspects of the definition, but sometimes looking up means, wait a minute, there's a new market over there. I can actually sell more of my stuff if I tweak my thing a little bit to pay attention to these people over here. So let's not forget there's an upside too. So we talked to business leaders all over the world to try to help understand how they viewed it. And I was really excited when I read the headline about the percentage of businesses that thought there was value in caring about responsible tech. The number one reason, compliance, because somebody's gonna tell you you have to care about it. But then I started seeing things that actually made a bit more, made me feel at least a little bit better. Protection from reputational harm, enhancement of brand, in particular, enhancement of your employer brand, your ability to recruit and retain people who share your values, increased market opportunity. They did actually recognize you might be able to expand your markets, and investor interest. With all of the ESG investing going on, being able to demonstrate credibly that you have a take on responsible tech is an important part of shareholder value. Come on, there we go. So, what are some things we can do? One of the things that we put together as Thoughtworks is something called the Responsible Tech Playbook. And it's a collection of many different techniques created by many different organizations. My favorite name in there is the tarot cards of tech, because you have these cards and you deal them out. And what they do is they try to get you to see things from a different perspective. But what are some of the things these companies told us about? Let's start talking about changing our methodologies and frameworks to take responsible tech into account. Data protection and privacy is an obvious one. Investing in transparency, not so obvious. But if you want to be credible in this, you need to be transparent about what you're trying to do, and potentially when you didn't actually predict what was going to go wrong. Eliminate and audit for algorithmic bias. The more we rely on algorithms that learn from our past, the more we are going to perpetuate the biases from the past. So let's audit it. Minimizing environmental impact, an obvious one. One of the things I started thinking about quite recently is, in a very real way, we are going back to a time much like when I started in technology, when you had real constraints on how you wrote programs. I can remember getting really excited when they said, we're going to get to another 4K of memory. And it's like, wow, the freedom, that's doubling our memory. That's nonsense. This clicker probably has that much memory in it. What we have now are carbon constraints, power constraints. Is this problem worth solving based on the costs? And if we take climate impact into account, our cost equations change. And of course, diversify the workforce. While we can't solve everything with diversity, at least if you've got people who think about problems differently, they might put their hand up and say, excuse me, have you thought about those people over there? And accessibility and inclusive design. We're getting many more tools available to make it far easier to design interfaces that are more accessible and inclusive. That's actually one of the themes that we just did on our radar that came out quite recently. So start to think about accessibility and inclusive design. But why don't we do it? It sounds obvious. None of you want to stand up and say, I build irresponsible technology and I'm proud of it. We don't want to do that, but we end up doing it. Why? Well, first, of course, is the fact that we don't always look up and think about what the impact of our technology is. But there's a real lack of senior management awareness. Think about that first one, compliance. We're going to do it because of compliance. And what do we want to see more of? More regulations so we know what to do. We don't want to figure it out for ourselves. Overall organizational resistance to change. People are used to solving problems in the way they have in the past. None of us like to change. Competing priorities, particularly in a macroeconomic environment right now. If you want to go to your boss and say, we need to spend a little more time before you get this to market to see if we can mitigate some of these consequences, that might be a hard sell. In part because there's still an appalling lack of digital literacy within many of the C-suites and boards. They just don't understand the potential impacts that technology can have, even on people that they are not explicitly going after. So a lack of digital literacy. This problem is getting better. In a generation or so, this wouldn't appear on a slide like this, but it's possible those other things would still appear. So back to the William Gibson quote. We are the ones that are making the decisions about how this technology can be used. We are the ones who are not necessarily paying attention to the ways that someone can use your technology in a way that you never intended. Mark Zuckerberg didn't set out to enable ISIS. That was not his intent. But we don't always see past the immediate consequences of the technologies that we deploy. And as a result, we often miss opportunities to make simple changes that could make a huge difference in the impact that our technology has. And this is my favorite quote from the report we did with MIT. This is from Kathy O'Neill, who is the author of The Weapons of Mass Destruction. We can make our technology more responsible if we believe we can and if we insist that we do. And again, the we in this sentence is us. It is our responsibility to say this stuff matters, and we need to look at how we build technology differently so that we can maximize the possibility of positive unintended consequences and mitigate against the unintended negative consequences. Thank you very much.